Mom's Organic Market, and Evolution Vegan Academy. We're thrilled today to do a wrap-up talk with Dr. Michael Greger as he walks his way through how to beat a pandemic on a virtual podcast with Carol from the podcast Exam Room Podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Gwen. We have spoken with so many people today, but Dr. Greger, I must say, you on the treadmill right now, this is an absolute first, and I can't think of a better way to wrap things up.
I'm glad to be here. I wish the whole thing was happening in person and we weren't facing the current crisis we are. But the good news is there's something we can do about preventing the next one.
No doubt. And before we get into that, I just want to say, for those of you who are listening to the audio portion of this, not only is Dr. Greger on a treadmill, he's on a treadmill in a tie. I mean, this is dedication to pounding the pavement, so to speak. This is just fantastic. I love it so much.
No pants, but a tie.
Okay, well, let's keep the camera above the waist. How about that? Wow. Thank you so very much for taking the time. I know that you are an extremely busy guy. Been speaking with so many people today about the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously. And I just want to start with the big question is, if people were not eating the standard American diet, so high in fat, so low in fiber, would the United States be in such a pickle that they are in right now?
And eating so much sodium, speaking of pickles. Yeah, we are one of the reasons why the United States now has the highest number of deaths compared to any other country in the world is because of these pre-existing conditions. Let's think about them: obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, hypertension. Every single one of them cannot just be prevented and stopped, arrested in their tracks, but reversed with a healthy enough plant-based diet. And so the fact that, for example, obesity is increasing the risk of a severe course of COVID-19 by 6-7 times, and that's for a BMI over 28. That's not even obese, that's just overweight, increasing sixfold, sevenfold the risk of a severe course. You know what the average BMI in the United States? 29, meaning most Americans, more than half, have so much excess body fat, are so overweight, they themselves are at significantly higher risk, not to mention all of the other underlying risk factors. That's why it's critical that we need to eat a healthy diet, not just to prevent chronic disease, but also to better face the other leading killers on the list, including infectious diseases like pneumonia. In fact, the 4th chapter of How Not to Die was how not to die from infections, concentrating on lower respiratory tract infections.
We'll talk about that in just a second. I want to talk to you about another study, sticking with the obesity thing. I saw this past week that said in younger people, the prevalence of obesity who had severe cases of COVID-19 was just through the roof. And as a matter of fact, the authors of this particular study kind of surmised that at this point, COVID-19 and obesity was more of a threat than heart disease. And I think that speaks volumes. And they talk time and again about the connection there because of the inflammation that is caused by obesity. And so my question, Dr. Greger, to you is this. We get so many people who write into the exam room who are new to a plant-based diet. They hear time and again, inflammation, inflammation, inflammation. But what in the world is inflammation, and why does food play such a role with it?
Yeah, so well, there's 2 different types broadly of inflammation. There's acute inflammation. That's when you get a splinter in your finger and your finger gets all red, hot, painful, swollen. That's your finger getting inflamed. That's actually a good thing. That's your body's immune response to try to get rid of that splinter and to fight off any bacteria that were introduced by that splinter. But there's another type of inflammation, the so-called smoldering, low-grade inflammation of chronic disease, this chronic overactivation of this inflammatory response on a day-to-day basis. No acute stressors, but just this underlying smoldering inflammation that contributes to many of our chronic diseases, such as heart disease and diabetes. And so it can be considered kind of like an autoimmune component where your body's just a little too revved up. So we can squelch that inflammation, reduce our risk of chronic disease by eating anti-inflammatory diets. What we eat can play a significant role in decreasing this systemic general inflammation that increases our risk for chronic disease. And the most anti-inflammatory foods are whole plant foods, fruits, vegetables, legumes, which are beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, whole grains, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, mushrooms, basically real food that grows out of the ground. These are our healthiest choices.
We are speaking with Dr. Michael Greger here at the virtual Fairfax Veg Fest and the Exam Room podcast. Quick check-in as you're taking a stroll. Are you at the quarter-mile mark now?
I am 57.19 miles this week. I average about 17 miles a day.
So this is your legitimate office. Like you are giving us some serious insight into the mind of Michael Greger.
Yeah, I work at a treadmill desk. Yeah, I mean, I'm only going about 1.8 miles an hour, but it just builds up over time because I work so long.
We talk so much about nutrition on this show, but how important then would you say that exercise and just walking 1.8 miles an hour while you're doing your work, how important is that then to reducing your risk of having a severe case of a viral infection, whether it be COVID or anything else?
Well, I mean, this was, at this speed, I'm not really getting aerobic exercise. I'm not really doing much weight bearing exercise. What I'm doing is I'm undermining the risks associated with prolonged sitting. So those who sit 6 or more hours a day, even if they then go out and work out an hour after work, are at significantly higher risk of death. And we think that's because of the stasis, the blood pooling in your legs, impairing the function of your arteries, increasing one's risk of cardiovascular disease. So it's really, I'm walking not so much to exercise, but walking so as not to sit so long, which increases one's risk of death. You've heard that, sitting's the new smoking. Not true at all. Smoking's 10 times more deadly, but prolonged sitting is indeed not a good thing, although has not been put to the test against infectious disease. But we do know that general, that exercise movement in general is important for maintaining a healthy immune system, as is getting sufficient sleep, 7 to 9 hours a night, stress management, and eating a healthy diet.
I'm curious, sir. You mentioned that you weren't wearing pants, so I will ask you to keep the camera where it is, but are you wearing sneakers to match the tie?
Well, I don't know if they match, but yes, you do need good footwear if you use a standing desk or a walking desk. Otherwise, it can get uncomfortable by the 16th mile or so.
I would imagine so. Let's get serious again for just a minute. Nutrition here, as we said, is such a critical role. And we know for a fact, with all of the comorbidities that we hear about with COVID, that a plant-based diet can be so beneficial in terms of treating them. And so while this virus is way too new to have any sort of firm study on the effect of a plant-based diet on this, we do know that it does help with the comorbidities substantially. Why is it then, Dr. Greger, by and large, we're not hearing a lot of doctors talk so much about the nutritional component of this and really kind of putting this to the test with their patients? I was speaking with Dr. Baxter Montgomery earlier today, and he was telling me about the success that he's having with his patients who have this and putting them on a plant-based diet. Why aren't we hearing so much about that?
Yeah, well, that's really exciting to hear. I hope he'll publish at least a case series. I'd love to do a video about it. Well, look, we're not hearing it for the same reason we didn't hear about it before COVID-19. Before COVID-19, the number one cause of death, heart disease. I mean, most of the leading causes of death tied to diet and lifestyle. So people were dropping dead unnecessarily, prematurely from these diseases long before COVID-19 came along. That's just exacerbating a pre-existing catastrophe of a chronic disease that need not happen. We've known for decades that our number one killer of men and women, heart disease, could be reversed with a healthy enough plant-based diet, yet hundreds of thousands of Americans continue to die unnecessarily from this preventable, arrestable, reversible disease.
What about somebody who is not exactly very well off financially? Okay, and they may live in an impoverished area, a food desert, as a lot of people like to coin the term. What advice would you have for them in terms of trying to eat more healthfully, even though they may not have access to the same types of grocery stores that you and I may have access to?
Look, the healthiest food is also the cheapest food. Have you priced dried beans lately? Seriously, like a pound of dried beans, right? I mean, oatmeal, apples, cabbage, some of the healthiest foods on the planet are some of the cheapest, least expensive foods on the planet. So you really get the best of both worlds. In fact, it's ironic now with COVID-19, all of a sudden people are going out and buying, canned beans, perhaps for the first time in their lives. And I can just imagine the Google search, what do I do with canned beans? But of course, we've all known for a long time, healthiest source of protein out there, legumes, all beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, have everything that you'd expect from a protein-rich food like iron and zinc, but lacking the saturated fat and cholesterol found in animal-based sources of protein, and as a bonus, has many of the nutrients found in plant foods, such as fiber and folate, these phytonutrients. So you really get the best of both worlds when we get our protein from plant sources, and legumes are the most concentrated source.
I'm sure the fans of yours are wondering, well, he's just talking about beans. I wonder what Dr. Greger's favorite bean is. Do you have a favorite bean, sir?
Who doesn't have a favorite bean? I'm a big fan of lentils. Why? Because they cook so quickly. My God, in my pressure cooker, 1 minute, I can cook them in 1 minute. But of course, canned beans take 0 minutes. You whip them out of the can, you make some hummus in no time. I do love lentils. Probably my favorite type are these little black lentils, also known as beluga lentils, because they look like a little round caviar. I love the texture. You eat them cold and in a salad, or lentil soup. I mean, just it's endless what you can do with legumes.
You're the second guy today to be on the lentil bandwagon, man. I gotta go get some lentils for dinner.
You need to absolutely get some lentils.
Get some lentils in your life, people. If you're gonna do one thing today, get some lentils in your life. Let's talk about some projects that you have in the works. I understand that you may be working on a new book. Is this true?
I have a new book. The manuscript is actually due tomorrow. Will be out fast-tracked May 26, 2020. So we're talking 1 month away. I'm going to publish How to Survive a Pandemic. It is coming out on ebook and audiobook. I'm going into the recording studio alone next week to record the audio. Unfortunately, physical copies of the book won't be out until this fall, but at least we will get this this important information into everybody's hands. May 26, it can be pre-ordered now, and all, of course, the proceeds from the book are donated to charity.
When you go into the studio and you read the copy, are you as enthusiastic with it as you're doing with this interview now, or do you do it more NPR style?
Oh, no. This is good stuff. I mean, it's a detective novel. Where did this virus come from in the first place? What can we do to prevent the emergence of future deadly viruses? It is a fascinating read, and it's I won't say it's a page turner because, again, there aren't going to be pages till this fall, but it's definitely a screen swiper.
Oh, man, screen swiper. Welcome to the 21st century, boys and girls. That is fantastic. Swipe right for nutrition. Oh my gosh, this is great. How to Survive a Pandemic. Do you talk at all about the origins of the virus in there? This is something that Dr. Barnard and I have been speaking about at length at the Physicians Committee, are these live animal markets where these viruses have originated. Have you had a chance to research those and how
Absolutely.
this
In fact,
virus?
that's what the whole book is about. Yes, there are chapters on, what we can do to protect ourselves and our family in terms of overcoming COVID-19. But the bulk of the book is really on exploring where these viruses came from in the first place and how we can prevent them in the future. Over the last few decades, new diseases have emerged or reemerged at a rate unprecedented in human history. AIDS, SARS, mad cow, bird flu, swine flu. Most of these new disease threats are coming from animals. Why? Because we're changing the way animals live on a global scale, right? The AIDS virus is blamed on the bushmeat trade in Africa, killing chimpanzees. SARS and COVID-19 trace back to the wild animal trade, these live animal wet markets in China. Mad cow is because we turned herbivores like cows and sheep into carnivores and cannibals by feeding them slaughterhouse waste, blood, and manure. Our last pandemic, swine flu in 2009, didn't arise from some backwater wet market in Asia, but was largely made in the USA on industrial pig operations in the United States. Now, thankfully, swine flu only triggered what the CDC calls a Category 1 pandemic, resulting in only about 500,000 deaths. But, the last time a bird flu virus jumped species and spread easily human to human, it triggered the worst plague in human history, the 1918 flu pandemic, which killed upwards of 50 million people. And from the point of view of that virus, the same trench warfare conditions that existed in World War I that led to the emergence of the 1918 virus exists today in every industrial chicken shed, in every industrial egg operation, crowded, confined, stressed, but not by the millions, but literally the billions. And now we have bird flu viruses like H5N1, H7N9, poised to kill millions around the globe should they lock in the necessary mutations to easily spread to human. And so that's why, we should really look to our own plates in terms of what we can do to prevent the next pandemic. We may just be one bush meat meal away from the next HIV, one pangolin plate away from the next coronavirus, and one factory farm away from the next killer flu. Tragically, we don't tend to shore up the levees until after the disaster strikes, and it may take a pandemic that wipes out millions before we really realize the true cost of cheap chicken.
So it sounds to me when the news first started to hit about, hey, there's this virus and it's coming hard, it really to you probably came as no surprise. It was more of a, here we go.
Yeah, I wrote, people I think tend to think, How Not to Die was my first book. It's actually my fourth book. The one before How Not to Die was on pandemic preparation and preparedness. I had a whole pandemic planning checklist for families. It was like the Daily Dozen for pandemic prep. Have the disposable gloves and the masks and the sanitizer, the food, the water, the toilet paper. I called it 14 years ago. In that book. The silver lining of COVID-19 is that this just may be kind of a dress rehearsal, a fire drill, kind of a dry run to get us ready and prepared and really focus on pandemic prevention. What can we do to give these animals some more breathing room? It's the pigs and poultry that need a little more social distancing, frankly, and what we can do to prevent the emergence of the next killer flu and the next deadly coronavirus.
Is it your estimation that given the magnitude of what we're experiencing right now on this global level, that we will learn certain lessons and be able to move forward and not have this recur?
Well, we certainly could. There's two ways we can go. It's ironic, and this is not just from an infectious disease standpoint. One of the risk factors that we didn't talk about for COVID-19 is air pollution. Those people who live, in addition to smoking, those people who live in polluted areas have diminished lung function and more likely to suffer a severe course. But ironically, because of the lockdowns in China, the air quality has improved so much that the number of people dying prematurely because of air pollution has dropped as many as 25 to 35,000 premature deaths a month in China, meaning COVID-19 may have actually saved lives in China because more people are being saved from the improved air quality than have been killed by the virus, right? I mean, that's how bad the air quality was. And so are we going to go back to before and have, 1,000 people dying a day in China from bad air pollution? Or are we going to think about how we can retool the system to make better personal decisions to affect global health? And by global health, I'm not only talking about pandemic risk, but I'm talking about the risk to our climate.
And I hear you say that, and it thinks back. I think back to this story that I saw in the past couple of weeks. Is people all over the world now are able to see so much further. The smog has literally lifted. We have reports out of Kenya where people are able to see a mountain peak that they haven't seen in decades. You have people in India from more than 100 miles away now able to see the Himalayan mountains. Like, this is remarkable. And you think about how quickly that stuff was able to clear up. It really puts things into perspective here.
Yeah. Look, it makes me think of how rapid the human body can heal once provided with a proper fuel. So people go their entire lives with chronic disease conditions, inflammatory arthritis, for example, and then within weeks of starting to eat healthier, their body comes back to health. Their body's been wanting to heal all along, but when it's being stabbed with a fork 3 times a day, it can never heal. And all you have to do, stand back, stop re-injuring ourselves 3 times a day at every meal, and all of a sudden our body can come back to health. And then it's up to the person. Do they want to go back to the diet that caused the disease, or do they want to look forward to a life of health and longevity? And I think we're facing that same decision on a global scale for our species.
Do you have any sort of insight into what way we're leaning right now based off of the traffic that you've seen over at Nutrition Facts? Have you seen an uptick since the pandemic began?
Well, I have been doing a lot of content on COVID-19. So we just published, we just did a 4-hour webinar, just published all the kind of takeaway notes from that. I've been, working really hard on putting together, just cutting through all the noise and nonsense out there and talking, what's the best way to treat this disease? What's the best way to avoid the disease? Best way to inactivate the virus, et cetera. There's tremendous body of literature coming out, 400 articles in the peer-reviewed medical literature every day now. And so really we have at Nutrition Facts built up this team that normally is concentrated on all the new obesity research and all the, but now the leading killer went from chronic disease to now COVID-19 every week is killing more Americans than chronic disease, than our leading chronic disease, more than heart disease. And so we've been able to kind of shift this research machine quickly, adeptly to, all right, well, now our number one priority, if our reason for existence is saving lives, well, then we're going to switch from chronic disease. We're going to switch to COVID-19. And so all of our, 200 research volunteers are now piling through the literature, and we're going to put out the best information there is about this disease. I've got a month-long series of videos coming up about this, have the new book coming out. I'm excited to be able to use this kind of machine that we've created to give people really the best science that we could find.
Well, I can't wait to continue to see what comes out. And I really can't wait for the audio version of How to Survive a Pandemic. I think that this is just going to be the gem of all gems. So this comes out again when, sir?
May 26th.
May 26th. Mark that down, boys and girls. May 26th is the big day. That is mandatory listening. So we will circle that on our calendars, and I will be sure to mention that again on the show. In the meantime, I just have a whole heck of a lot of fun. I never thought I would ever be able to say, hey, I took a walk with Dr. Michael Greger, but lo and behold, this is exactly what we've been doing for the past half hour. So thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Looking very much forward to getting back and walking face to face. But until then, yes, indeed, social distancing is really spatial distancing, physical distancing. We should stay as social as possible, albeit from a distance, and connect with friends and family, and take this opportunity to take care of ourselves to better withstand whatever the world has to come.
All right, Dr. Michael Greger, thank you so very much. Good luck with the new book and enjoy the rest of your walk.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Greger. Well, that wraps up our event for today. Fairfax Veg Fest, the first virtual ever event. And we're waiting for Gwen. I think she's going to come on here and join us in a minute. I don't know if she's there or not.
I'm here. I'm trying to figure out how to get my screen back on.
There we go. The
All
gang
right.
is all here.
Yes. So
what a
do you
way to
guys
wrap
think?
up the day. I mean,
Yeah.
what a way to wrap up the day. Did you ever think that when we were putting the schedule together, that we would have an interview with Dr. Greger where he's on the treadmill? How fantastic was that?
I feel like I want to go for a walk.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. I think it's, am I on or no?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, very cool.
got
I don't see myself, but yeah, no, it was an exciting day. I think we were very fortunate to get the full lineup of speakers, and hopefully not only were people able to capture their favorite speakers and listen to them today, but we'll be rebroadcasting those through the Exam Room podcast, I guess, when they're ready. And they'll be still resident on a Plant-Based Diet YouTube channel and Green Fair Organic Cafe and Fairfax Veg Fest Facebook page. So thank you both, Chuck, for the marathon talks today, for hanging in there and focusing with each person with the care and intensity that you usually bring to your interviews. And Mike, thanks for the technical prowess in keeping everything live and streaming and mostly faultless today. So the preambles that we did, I think were beneficial. So if either of you want to add anything else, I'm very thrilled that we were able to present this. And you know, without any further ado, I guess I'll sign off and say we'll see everybody in 2021.
Yeah, well, I do want to echo a lot of what you said when you were interviewing Gwen in the first interview today, just with the great work, Gwen, that you're doing at Green Fair Organic Cafe. And hopefully this whole event's been a showcase to enlighten folks as to what's going on in Northern Virginia, and hopefully what would hopefully want to go on everywhere. I'd say that what you're doing at the restaurant is more of like a goal for every other food establishment out there. And I think that, you know, all of humanity will be better off. And as I said to you, Glenn, recently, I feel like Fairfax County, Virginia might be the next blue zone. As soon as we have enough people that we've got into the mix here, there we go.
That's great. And Gwen, just one more time, thank you, as Mike just said, for everything and for keeping the doors at Green Fair open as much as possible right now with the delivery and the takeout. It's so important, as we've heard time and again from all of the experts today, how important nutrition is, and you are providing that to the community. And it's an invaluable service. It's more than just a full belly. It is truly medicine. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess maybe just to wrap up, the people that worked on the Veg Fest with Mike and myself, Pericles from Green Fair, Pat Barton did our stage and sound. John Foster has been a diehard worker with us. Marsha Peters, Terry Siggins, Denise Young, and Ruth Mulcurin. So I want to thank all of you for the participation in our VegFest Council, and particularly the sponsors of Mom's Organic Cafe and Evolution Vegan Academy for hanging there with us and allowing your donation to go forward to next year. So thanks again, everybody, and stay safe and stay healthy. Stay plant-based.
Yeah. Bye-bye.